You know, Monticello is recognized as a United Nations World Heritage Site and a site of conscience. It's so beautiful with the surrounding hills. And both of you have spent quite a bit of time there and experienced that power of place. And so I'm curious, what do you think makes Monticello so unique? And what would entice people from all around the world to come and visit?
If you want to understand America, if you want to understand ourselves, not only then but now, Monticello is an essential stop, because there's the promise of the country written by the master of Monticello, and there's the fact that he was the master of Monticello, and that he was unable to fulfill the obligations that he laid out. As Dr. King would say, he never made good on the promissory note that he wrote in the Declaration. And you see the incredible number of facets of Jefferson. The inventor, the architect, the wine connoisseur, as well as the politician, the slaveholder, the farmer. And so I think it's really like looking at once into a mirror and through it, to the past and to who we are now.
Monticello is beautiful. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was home to the author of the Declaration of Independence and the third President of the United States. But what gives Monticello its heart and soul are the stories of the people who lived there. And at any given time, there were far more Black people living at Monticello than white people.
Indeed.
And those enslaved people are my family. It's the quintessential American story. It's not just the story of enslavement, it's the story of a people making the best they could of the circumstances in which they found themselves. It's the story of a people who started at the bottom and whose descendants rose up as far as they could to claim their part of the American dream, the part that Jefferson promised to all, but that this country didn't give everyone when it was founded. That's the story that people should come to Monticello to hear, the American story. So that's what makes it special.
You know, I think of Thomas Jefferson saying, we're not afraid to follow the truth wherever it leads.
Right.
And I know you've talked about honest history, and I think that's so much an important part of what we see at Monticello now. And we talk of Thomas Jefferson being so talented in so many different ways, an architect and you know, a planter. He did all kinds of innovations with his garden and bringing wine to Virginia, so many things that he was a part of. But he was indeed a complicated person.
Thomas Jefferson's cook, one of his cooks, was my great-great-great-grandfather. But what can't be forgotten is that Thomas Jefferson was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. So yes, indeed it's a complicated story. Complicated for me because I have mixed feelings about Jefferson. His blood, his DNA runs through my veins. But yet he enslaved my family.
Yeah.
And we live with the vestiges of slavery today. So, yes, it's a complicated experience. At the same time, it's an extraordinary experience. And what I'd like people to do is come there and feel as much as they can of what I feel. To walk those grounds, to sense the people who lived and died there, who spent their entire lives there because they were in bondage and couldn't go anywhere else. But in the end, their descendants did so much for this country as well.
They did.
Founded churches, were part of the Underground Railroad, founded the Niagara Movement, which was part of, or the precursor to the NAACP, became politicians, engineers, architects, artists, doctors, lawyers. Isn't that the American story? Isn't that what we've all strived for and what we want for our children? So there's so much to that story of Monticello. A lot more than Thomas Jefferson.
That's so true.
And one great thing that Monticello has done is fully embrace the complexity. You know, the natural instinct when you have a historic house or historic place is make sure your guy looks great. That's sort of number one. And I think, to its enormous credit, the Jefferson Foundation and Monticello has decided to confront the truth, and it's not a pleasant truth. It's just a complicated one. And as Gayle says, it wasn't just Thomas Jefferson's house. It was an entire universe of people.
Can history help us to build those public conversations about the big issues today?
I think it might be the only thing that can help us have those conversations. We are brilliant at the aspirational, and we're pretty good at delivery, but we're not perfect. And we have a remarkable capacity to live with contradiction. And there is no better example in American history of living with contradiction than Thomas Jefferson.
Right. Okay.
The past isn't dead, it's not even past. So how can we learn, how can we know who we are without examining who we were?
So true.
If we don't understand how we arrived here, how can we address it and correct it? And we must correct it.
1619, we're commemorating the commemoration of 1619 in 2019 coming up soon, so there's a lot of preparation for that. And of course we're thinking 1619 is the first anniversary for when bringing enslaved Africans to the Americas. And so a lot of discussion around this in the state of Virginia right now. It's not just Monticello, Montpelier, which is so close by. We were just talking about Madison, Dolly Madison. They're also looking at how to deal with the enslaved peoples in their plantation, having a conversation around that as well with a mere distinction of color, which is so beautifully done as well. We have several historic homes, including my own, the Executive Mansion we're dealing with right now. And we originally, tours coming in would talk about those who lived upstairs. And I said, wait a minute, when do we talk about the women that lived here during this time period? When do we talk about all the people who did the work around here to make Virginia what it is today? And those voices, as you said, had not been heard from. So it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for all of us to learn from what Monticello has been doing in other areas like Montpelier, and to see how we can start these civil discourse and discussion around where we've been to know better where we are going in 2019 and beyond.